Welcome to the podcast editing and support show. My name is Dave. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start the episode right now. Happy to have you here. Let's do this. Okay, welcome back to the show. Happy to be back with you again on the podcast editing and support show. I'm Dave. Good to be here. And we're going to talk today about leveling up your podcast. How about 8? I'll give you 8. These are free, by the way. You don't have to pay me for these. I'm not going to charge you when you try to leave the room. 8 editing tricks for captivating episodes. Captivate, that sounds familiar. Oh yeah, we're hosted on Captivate.fm. There you go. Shameless plug. If you're interested in Captivate.fm, great people, great hosting site for your podcasts. All the information in the show notes. Captivate.fm. I'm not sponsored really, but if you use the link, I might make a little bit of money. So thanks for that. But try Captivate. They're amazing. But how can we level up our podcast, Dave? How can we level up what we do as an editor, as a podcaster? Do you have any editing tricks for us, Dave? Anything we can do? I do, and thank you for being here. You ready? Strap in, put your seatbelt on, grab a nice beverage, and here we go. You ready? Here we go. So there's 8 simple tips for a new podcast editor to tighten up their episodes and be better for your host as you edit their show. Also, host, you can listen in on this as well. These can help you and kind of how you record, because you can actually save some time and money by fixing some of these things before you even send it to your editor by simply recording your episodes better. So keep these in mind as we listen. But for the most part, we're focusing more on the editors today in the show. But you as a podcast host, stick with us. I'm sure you're going to pick something up in the way as well. So first of all, we need to choose the right software to do our editing. So if you're a brand new editor and you have no idea what you're doing, one of the first things you're going to have to decide on is what are you going to use to edit your show? So there are a ton of options out there, paid options. There's downloads you can buy. There's all kinds of different things. There's free options too as well. So for you Mac users, which I am not, sorry, there's GarageBand. But as well, for me, and it also works on Apple products, I'm an Audacity guy. So because I've been in music recording for, a long time, I've been a musician for 45 years. I've been using Audacity basically since it came out. So it's kind of like whatever you know the best is best for you. So don't let anybody try to steer you away from what works for you. There's limitations in every software. There's things you don't need in every software. So you need to decide what works for you. If you're ever curious about Audacity and you just want a live demo specific to podcasting, I know you can go to YouTube and watch somebody else show you stuff. But if you want to do this together one-on-one, I'd love to jump on a Zoom call, share my screen, and show you the basics of Audacity for your podcast editing business, or for you as a podcaster, if you want to learn how to use it yourself. There's a great way to do that. Just get together with me through the website and let's do an online demo, you and I. Totally free. Won't cost you anything. We'll spend 30 minutes together. I'll show you how to do an intro and an outro, the basics of recording, and some of the tools you'll need in Audacity. But the first thing you need to do as an editor, and even as a podcast host, if you want to record locally, is to use Audacity. And another bonus to this, Audacity doesn't require the internet for recording. So you could, on your laptop, go out in the backyard, find a quiet spot, and record without even needing the internet. That's another bonus of Audacity, so I love it for that as well. The second thing is you got to come up with a way to organize all your files. So right now I'm working on multiple shows, my own shows. I have 8 of my own podcasts, including this one. And then I also do editing for clients. Now, everybody that I work with seems to have a different way of organizing their files. I'll get one-word episode titles from one podcaster. That's it. They'll say hope. I'm we need a little more than one word to be found for this episode. So I go through and do the transcription and all that stuff, and then pull out key points and get a summary as well as a description of the episode. And then from there, I kind of break it down from transcription to summary to title. so that I can come up with something that's a little more searchable than just hope. But the one thing you got to keep in mind is how you're going to keep all your files straight. So for me, and again, there's a lot of debate about this in the podcasting space, I always put the episode number at the beginning of my episode. And now I know already there's people shaking their head in disbelief that I'd even say that on a podcast. But the reason why is when I sort my files in my file folders, it sorts by the episode number so that I can see them all in order. And you could put the episode number at the end, but you won't be able to sort it that way. Now, I know you can add different columns. I get all that. But for me, it's just simple and straightforward. When I post my podcast to YouTube through a direct connection from my audio hosting site, Captivate, to YouTube, I also then go in and alter the episode title in YouTube because the episode number, not so important on YouTube. And you only have 100 characters. So I want to make sure that I get the most I can from that title because that's very important on YouTube. So I do alter my episode titling differently on YouTube just for that reason. But I do have it connected through my audio host on Captivate.fm. So every time an episode goes out to Apple and Spotify and Audible and all those different places, it automatically goes to YouTube as well. Why do I do that? I treat YouTube as my storage drive for my podcasts. And it's a way to have free backup storage of every episode you've ever done. So if you decide to leave Captivate, which you shouldn't because they're great, but if you stop paying for your hosting site, you lose your podcast. You won't have anything happen in the future, and it could be deleted once you stop paying for your hosting site. So connecting yourself to YouTube as you're posting episodes will be a backup storage archive of your show that lasts into the future. So I would suggest that you connect your podcast to YouTube just for that reason alone. Nothing about making money with YouTube, nothing about growing your audience with YouTube, none of those things. Just the fact that you have a backup storage through YouTube, I think it's a wise move to consider. It's not a video podcast, it's just audio, it's just an image, but it's a great way to back up your work. And for those that are very curious about that or concerned that they want their podcast to live on after their hosting site, then I would suggest YouTube as a great option. Keep that in mind. But you need to organize your files in a way that's easy for you to manipulate, find, search, all those things. Now, again, you're going to hear a lot of things from different podcast gurus about the power of your episode title. The episode title is my file name for my show. So in my file name, I want to know the episode number. So if you don't agree with that, I apologize. But for me, that's really important. The second thing is if it's an interview podcast, I want the name of my guest in the podcast title. Now, there's going to be people tell you that you should have only the topic of the episode and never put in the guest in the title, which for me does not make much sense. I understand that not every guest I have is a big name guest, highly searchable and highly searched on all the places. But if I'm going to share this episode with my guest to share, I think they're going to want their name in the episode. And when I go to YouTube, remember that YouTube is an archived location, an archived drive of my episodes. I can go into my YouTube channel and search within my own channel and pull up all the information from my past guests in a moment's notice. So instead of going to my computer to search for what episode did JJ come on, I just go to my YouTube channel, type in JJ, and there's the episode number. It's very fast. So YouTube is great for that, for search. Not just for people to find you, but for you to find your own stuff. So organize your files. Make sure you have, I would suggest, an episode number in the title somewhere, and the name of your guest if it's interview-based, and then having the keywords into your title that'll be searchable. And then use that as your file naming system so that you can then organize yourself and stay on top of your files. Because if you lose track of that and you're not a disciplined person, you're going to become a mess over time and it's not going to work for you and it'll be frustrating. So organize your files. The next part, make an outline. One of the things that I work with podcast hosts as their editor is to make an outline of their podcast that they're giving to me to edit. One of the podcasters I work with, they want to sometimes move the content around. So something that was said in the middle would be better in context if it was closer to the front. Something at the end should be better in the middle, and something at the front should be at the end. And they want to make some moves. So what I do is I have a Google Pixel phone, so I can only speak to what I have. So I'm sure your phone has something similar. But there's a recorder app on my phone. It's native to my phone. And what I do is I take my phone and I open their file that they send me that needs to be edited. And I simply hit record on my phone, and it has an option to record the audio, and you can actually flip over to transcription as well. And it allows me then to record the podcast they're giving to me before we've even started editing, just the raw file. I hit record on my phone, I play the file on my phone as well, and I just set my phone aside. I go on to a different task, and it records the entire podcast in raw format that needs to be edited. It records it and makes a transcript out of it. And then I just email the transcript from my phone back to my Google, and now I have a workable transcript. So now I can go through and start cutting and moving things around if I need to, and it has timestamps. And it's all there on my phone. So I'm not paying anybody to do that for me, but I use it to make an outline of my episode. And when they say, take the part about, and they tell me like a key term or key words or something, I can search within my Google document and find the section they're talking about. As well, they might tell me, at the 1 minute mark, I want to move the 1 minute mark to the end of the show. I can just go through my timeline and my time stamps, find the 1 minute mark, cut that out, and move it over. And I just do that through Audacity. So I have my template up, my original template from the unedited raw version of the podcast they sent me. I find it, and then in Audacity, match it up with the timeline in Audacity, and make all the changes. So it works really well for me. So make some sort of outline, whether that's just you listening to it, if you want to take time to do that. But for me, I have so many things going on that I just let my phone do it for me, and I send it back to myself, and that's where my starting point is for my edits. So make an outline. Works really well for you as you are then doing emails back and forth with the podcast host around what they want to see cut and moved. It's nice to have an outline. So start with that. Number 4 is you need to learn your tools. On top of being a podcaster and an editor and all that, and having a full-time job, my wife and I also buy rental property. And in buying a rental property, you get some pretty interesting places which haven't been maintained, need a lot of work. And I have a tool bag that I bring with me from site to site to site. My wife and I have 3 different properties right now that we have as rentals. And when you walk through the door and realize that you got to take off like the light switch plates, and you got to fix the oven, and you got to do this, and you got to move that over here, and you need a tool for this and a tool for that. If I walked in with one hammer, one screwdriver, I would be pretty limited to my options about replacing and fixing things in the building when I walk in. I need a bunch of different tools, and they all have different functions. And if I know my tools, I can be faster and more effective in fixing the things that need to be fixed on site without trying to make a tool do something it wasn't meant to do. So for you as an editor, you need to learn your tools and stop using tools the wrong way and trying to get them to do things they weren't intended to do in the first place. So you need to familiarize yourself with, what does the term splitting mean? What does trimming mean? What does fading mean? What does it mean to balance the audio? How come all my voices are in my left ear and all my music is in my right ear? You need to know about equalizing and bringing up the bass and adjusting the treble. What do you do if you have somebody with really harsh S's and they sound like they're just scratching your ears from the inside? What does it mean to normalize the volume for your podcast? What is the industry standards for the level of volume for your podcast? You need to understand the tools so that you can do your best as an editor. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, you listen to podcasts about podcast editing, and you do your research and spend a lot of time on YouTube University, because all of those things are going to help you to be better at what you do. And then I would suggest not only just that you search how to do these things, but how you do these things specific to the workstation, the digital audio workstation. We also call it, the cool kids call it the DAW that you use. So for me, again, I'm going to search through Audacity on how to do a certain task and then use that as my guide. So there's so much information out there. There's no need to recreate the wheel. Just use your search abilities and find a dedicated official YouTube channel for whatever digital audio workstation that you use and subscribe to it. And then follow all their updates, because they'll give you updates on new releases, new tools, new updates. All those things are going to show up on those YouTube channels to keep you informed. So you need to know your tools, everybody. When you look across the top of the screen, see all those buttons you've never pushed before, you got to go figure out what they do. So invest the time to learn the tools. It's going to serve you better and make your workflow faster. So an example here in Audacity, I have in my tools at the top of the screen, I have a way to create, which is in effect the same as what you'd see in Microsoft. We call them macros. And a macro simply is a recording of steps in order that is done on a regular basis. You do it repeatedly. So I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. You can set up a macro in Microsoft that will run those steps in order with one click of a button, instead of you clicking it, doing it over and over and over. So ignore the repetitive steps. One click does it all. So in Audacity, they do the same thing, where I can do some audio edits to my file while I'm drinking coffee. I click one button, it goes through, it does everything I want in order to my specifications, and I can do something else. I can go answer an email, I can go do something else, come back, and it's all done for me. Instead of me sitting here clicking the same button over and over and over and over and over and over every time, I just take all of those steps, combine it into one click, and now I can go do something else. So learn your tools, everybody. And if you're interested about Audacity as well, because that's what I can speak to, then reach out to me through my website. I'd love to help you. Also, remove unnecessary audio during the edits. So unnecessary audio, what do I mean? So when I look at an interview, for example, I have 2 tracks, which I prefer. I like to have 2 tracks, a track for the host and a track for the guest. So when I marry up the two, I look at when the guest is speaking, I can see the waveform, and I can see a big silence piece when the guest is speaking. So I match those up as much as I can. And I want to make sure that when my edit, even if my guest or my host talks over each other, I try to move it a little bit so that they're not. Or I silence one of the two so that there's not this thing happening for your listener where they're trying to figure out who's talking right now. I have no point of reference. So I try to silence anytime there's overspeak, because it's really annoying for a listener. So I'll either move the track slightly so that they're not talking over each other, or I'm going to silence one of the 2 speakers who's ever irrelevant in the moment. That whole you go, no you go, no you go, no you go. I get rid of all that stuff. So, but I also then try to trim out, if there's a gap where the host asks a question, and then there's like a little space. That felt weird, right? That felt weird right there. And then the guest answers. I trim that up. So the host asks the question, the guest answers. See what I did there? That's exactly what I try to do, is I try to take out that little break, that little gap. And I just do that at the beginning and the end of each question and answer. I just tighten them up a little bit, bring them a little closer together, which trims off like a microsecond of the podcast, I realize. But it makes it flow a little bit better. And what you're going to find in some of the automated tools out there, like a Descript and stuff, is they're a little more harsh with those cuts. So it'll push the words closer together between guest and host, and it removes almost every ounce of silence, which then feels forced and rushed. And I feel anxious as a listener in that moment, because there's no healthy breaks for pauses and breaths like you'd hear in a normal conversation. So keep that in mind. But remove any dead air. If you want to, you can focus on the ums and the ahs, any coughs. So if somebody coughs and then says, oh, excuse me, or sneezes or something like that, achoo, right? And they're like, oh, sorry. I just take that out. That doesn't add any value to anybody, right? And I do that for my hosts on their behalf. It's fine. I just take care of that. Also, you can take out anything that will improve the listening experience for your listener, but don't over edit and don't disrupt the natural flow of the conversation. Okay? Make it feel like two humans talking, not two robots. Okay? And I know there's a lot of people who like to listen to podcasts at faster speeds just because they're busy apparently and they don't have time to listen to a podcast. So they're going to speed it up anyway, so don't worry about them. The natural cadence and flow of a podcast creates an environment and a mood for your show, which is more accommodating for people who are listening maybe at a regular speed or need some gaps in the conversation to keep up with what you're saying. So you can slow it down, okay? So keep that in mind. Remove any unnecessary audio. That's really important. The next, number 6, is add an attention grabber. So what do I mean by an attention grabber? Well, that would be the music, for example. Having something at the beginning of your podcast that signals the start. When you go to a sporting event, what do? They sing the national anthem. Why? Well, it's important. But 2, it signals that we're starting off now. It's a way of doing something that captures everyone's attention, focuses them on the fact that we're beginning, and off we go. So use something that's an attention grabber. Intro music, interesting audio clips, or other hooks to captivate the listeners from the start. On Living the Next Chapter, my author podcast, I always take a little clip from the discussion from my guests and put it at the beginning. Some people like that, some people don't. The reason I do is because every episode is about my guest. It's not about me. So I want you to hear the guest voice first as a unique opportunity for you to listen and go, am I interested in this episode or not? Title helped, description helps, but I'd love to hear the voice of the person and kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. So I use it. So anything you could do to grab attention from the very beginning, very important for YouTube. If you're going to be a YouTube-focused podcast, you definitely want to make sure that your beginning is important and you don't have a 2-minute intro, because no one's going to listen to that on YouTube, just so you know. Grab their attention right from the start. Number 7 is try some sound design. So what do I mean by sound design? One of my other shows is the Daily Santa podcast. It is 25 episodes in a row for kids, and it starts December 1st and goes to December 25th. And it's a countdown to Christmas to get kids to be good humans leading up to Christmas Day, because Santa's watching. You know, and whether or not you believe in Santa, that's irrelevant. The idea is just that we need to have good human kids trying their best to be great in the month of December. And it's a kids podcast. So in this kids podcast, I have music, sound effects, all kinds of things. I have different AI voices that help me in the show because I'm not really a good elf. So I got all these tools and things to make this show happen. And I actually will add in, like, for example, there's one episode where one of the characters on the show is walking through the forest in the snow, and I have the sound of crunching snow under your feet as they're walking. So put you into the place, put you into the moment. Music, sound effects, all those things set a stage for what we're doing. I did an episode of the How to Podcast series, and I talked about how wouldn't it be great if somebody who believed in you kind of showed up in your life and said, I believe in you and I think you could do this. Follow me and I'm going to help you chase your dreams. And I used an example in a story about when my family and I went dirt biking. We'd go ride dirt bikes for the day, and we were like at a formal place where they teach you. And so I had the sounds of dirt bikes and stuff zipping around in the background, just to kind of give you the context of, oh yeah, I feel like I'm there in the moment. Like I can see the dirt in the air, that kind of thing. So using that kind of stuff brings people into the show. Don't go too heavy into it, right? You don't have to go crazy with this, and make sure the levels are low enough that it doesn't fight for your attention as a listener to hear the voices of the people on the show. But adding some kind of interesting stuff in the background, it's great. Really works great. So try some sound design. You can also have, like you hear in this show, I have these little gaps where I put these sounds like this, which just helps signal the fact that we're moving on to the next thing. So little bumpers, stingers, effects, sweepers, all those things, use them sparingly, but they do help your audience to kind of stay up with what's happening in the show. Back when I was little, we had these audiobooks which would tell you to turn the page, and they make a sound like a ding, and then it was time for you to turn the next page. So that's kind of the idea. We're just turning the next page in our content. So add these little sound design elements. It does help your audience to stay in touch with you and center them back to, oh yeah, we're on to the next thing. So with that in mind, we're on to the next thing. Review your edits. And here's the sound effect. Now, this is something that I don't hear a lot of editors talk about, that they do this. And I don't know why, but here we go. So review your edits. I want you to listen to the full edited episode as a listener. Now you're like, wait, Dave, I'm busy. I got a lot of stuff going on. I got all these other things to edit. But as you listen to an episode as a listener, not as a podcast editor or as a podcaster, then you might want to make some final adjustments. So here's what I do. I'm a little behind the scenes for you. On my Living the Next Chapter podcast. It's an author podcast. They're like 30 to 45 minute episodes. And by the time I'm done editing, I'm done listening to this show, like this specific episode, because I've been like cutting it apart and fixing it and putting it all back together. But I'm a human being and I make mistakes. So what I do is I post an advanced copy of the episode to YouTube manually. Not through my hosting site, but manually. I upload a video of the audio. That sounds interesting, right? A video of the audio. I use oneimagevideo.com. I take a YouTube thumbnail and my MP3 from my audio, and I attach them together on oneimagevideo.com. It's free. And it gives me back a video file, which I can upload to YouTube. I set it as private, and my wife has access to my YouTube channel. And what she does is she goes in and she listens to the episode as a listener. She's not an editor. She's not a full-time podcaster. She just listens to the show. And if she thinks it's good and she doesn't hear anything weird where I miss something and there's big gaps or I'm talking over my guest or any of that stuff, then she'll make it go live. And if there's a problem, she'll send me a screenshot and say at the 3-minute mark, Dave, there's like 2 minutes of nothing. Oh, that's me. Okay, so then she'll send that to me in an email. I go in, I do the updates, repost it, we're good. So I have a backup to listening to my show. So whether it's you listening to your show or a family member or the host, someone needs to listen to your final edit to make sure that you're not missing things. I listen to podcast gurus who have been podcasting for 20 years. And they record and edit their own show. And you can tell that they gave up about 3/4 of the way and they just phoned in the rest. They didn't care because they leave big silent gaps, like 3 minutes of nothing at the end of the show. And as a listener, you're like, why is my app stop working? Oh no, we're still playing the episode that ended 3 minutes ago, but they have 3 minutes of nothing. Or they do like weird edits where they start swearing at themselves or they're angry that they just screwed up, but they don't take it out and they leave it in because they forgot to edit. So I would really suggest as an editor, as a podcaster, that you listen to your final edits before they go out to your community. Now, you can always go back and fix them in the future, but why not just spend a moment to make sure what you're sending out to the world is the best it possibly can be? It's not going to be perfect, but it's better if you listen to your show. So those are my suggestions for you. 8 things for you to consider as an editor, as you should be focusing on editing your podcast to captivate, again with the word captivate listeners with your episodes. Choose the right software, organize your files, make an outline, learn your tools, remove unnecessary audio, add some form of attention grabber to your podcast, try some sound design elements, and review your edits. And if you have any questions about finding a podcast editor, which I am one, or getting your podcast better and being a better editor, being a better podcaster, I'd love to help you on the website, podcasteditingandsupport.com. And thank you for listening to the show. More new episodes coming out now, and excited to be back on the mic with you here on the show. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Thanks for listening to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. Visit us at podcasteditingandsupport.com. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. We would love to help you find a great podcast editor, or if you want to hire us, we would love to work with you. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.